It's morphin' time! Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome back to another tier list video. This time we're doing something a little different. I've been getting a ton of requests from people to do a Gundam tier list. So I decided, alright, let's do it. Let me cover every Gundam anime that I've seen. So this isn't going to be one video. What you're seeing today is going to be part one of a series of tier lists. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to keep the same tier list, it's just with each part we're going to add to it. Because if we did all the Gundam TV shows, movies, OVAs, specials, shorts with stories, other random things that exist, it would be way too long for one video, so I figure let's split it up. So part one will be the TV anime specifically, but there is a couple restrictions. I'm not going to be including Gundam the Origin Advent of the Red Comet or Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn RE0096 because those are TV retellings of OVA series that aren't retellings in the sense that they tell a different story. They're actually just cut together a little different. If you want to know, like, my thoughts on them, I think they're both fine, but I typically prefer the OVA versions. Though Unicorn RE0096 has the coolest opening ever for episode 18. They took one of the best endings of Unicorn and made it a good episode opening. But other than that, I mean, they have new openings and ending sequences, but that's it. Everything else is exactly the same story. And that goes to the same for some other things. Like, you won't see the Gundam Wing Operation Meteor OVA on these tier lists because it doesn't tell anything new, it's just recapping. Same with like the Gundam Seed in this era shorts. But if it tells a different story, like the original Gundam compilation films, or the Seed Special Edition, or the 00 Special Edition, then we'll be including it. And that's essentially how I've proceeded forward. There will be like a fourth part that's going to be the shorts and specials, and those again have to have a story to them. So something like the Unicorn Perfectibility short, which is just, hey, look how great the Unicorn Perfectibility is, doesn't get included. It has to have some semblance of a story. So with that said, we're going to go through all the TV shows. I'm going to try to do these in chronological order. My images are all mixed up, so we're hopefully not make this too much of a scavenger hunt. And we'll be ranking them on an S to F scale. Because yes, even though I love all Gundam and have watched pretty much almost everything at least twice, there is a lot of exclusions on that. But I've watched a lot of Gundam, I love Gundam, but there is some F tier stuff because, oh boy, there's some things. I don't know if any of the TV shows are going to end up in F tier, but we're going to be ranking these, and they're going to be taken on their own merits. So for example, I'm not going to be ranking SD Gundam Force against Mobile Suit Gundam in the sense that, are these both covering the same subject? Because they're not. I'm going to be ranking them on what the type of show is. So keep that in mind. Now, I've labeled, all my tiers. So S tier is new type, A tier is coordinator, B tier is X-Rounder, C tier is innovator, D tier is build fighter, F tier is human debris. So if you get all those references, let me know in the comments below because I want to see, especially B tier. I think most people won't catch that one at first. But we're going to cover pretty much all the TV shows, and I don't want this to run too long, so we're going to get started. And like I said, we're just going to go through these, and I did split up Iron-Blooded Orphans, Gundam 00, and Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise because there was an airing break that was more than just like a week or two between the first half and second half of their shows. So there are separate posters for making them Season 1 and Season 2. So with all that aside, that's all the preamble I'm going to do. Let's get into it. So first up, we have 1979's Mobile Suit Gundam. Now this is the iconic classic anime that started this all. And it's a show that I think has held up incredibly well. I think there's a reason why, we have other versions of the story with the movies, with the origin, manga specifically. This is what sparked the inspiration for all of Gundam going forward. And I think when it comes for me, when I initially watched it, I found it a little bit of a slog, but I was kind of like, some of it wasn't clicking for me because I'd just come off of watching, I think, 00. So it was a bit of a change. But I honestly think that, we'll talk about the movie version in part 2, but I think that on its own, the original TV version still holds up incredibly well, even with some of its weirder episodes. And yeah, Kukuru's Doan's Island, the infamously banned 15th episode, the one that doesn't get released outside Japan that's now getting a movie adaptation, because everything's crazy now, that doesn't drag the show down. I think some of the wonky animation in the middle does hurt it a little bit, but for me, I'm still going to put Mobile Suit Gundam in the S tier because I still think all of its themes and stories hold up 40 years later, and that's pretty impressive. So next up we have Zeta Gundam. Now Zeta Gundam is the sequel. It's really well loved now, where I think that Zeta Gundam was not initially met with praise in Japan. A lot of people did complain that it was too dark, and it is kind of too dark and depressing. That being said, I love the sound design of Zeta Gundam. I've found I've used it as a sleep aid before. When I just can't sleep, I'll put on Zeta Gundam because I like the way the mobile suits sound. The music by Shigeyasu Sugusa is just so good. And you know, it has like a pleasant feel for me. It feels very Gundam. And I usually put it on the Japanese version, so don't worry about the storyline as much. But Zeta Gundam is quite a work, and I think that it's one that ultimately leaves a bittersweet kind of inconclusive feeling. So while I think that Zeta Gundam is a step up in production level on a lot of things with animation, its storytelling does get a little too depressing at times, and I think it lacks a little bit of hope at the end. This is something that would kind of get corrected by Double Zeta, but Zeta Gundam is going to go in the A tier. And that's just, again, I don't know if it holds together as well, taken, you know, out of a different context. If you're looking for a very serious Gundam show, Zeta. And I still love a lot about it. It's not like, I mean, putting it in the A tier, I don't need to justify that. We're moving on. All right, so the next show was Double Zeta Gundam. Now, this is a show that has a really infamous reputation in the Western audience for Gundam, and I think that it's time to dispel that a little bit, because I think that, you know, a lot of people see Double Zeta without actually watching it. They see it as like, oh, it went super comedic and goofy right after Zeta, and it's like, yeah, have you seen Zeta's ending? If you haven't, it's not happy. Typically with Yoshiyuki Tomino directing a show, he tends to do like a serious show, then a goofy show, serious show, then goofy show. And he did that. There was like a really goofy show he did after Gundam. This is like the pattern of him as a director. And so what he does is the early part of Double Zeta, he goes really goofy slapstick with it, because I think he realized how depressing Zeta was, and especially the feedback they were getting from the home audience at the time of airing. This does not make Double Zeta bad, because the second half is probably even darker than Zeta, and there's a lot of stuff that happens. And I think that most people don't ever get over that, oh, it's comedic and goofy. It is in the beginning to give you a tonal breather from Zeta. But I think overall as a show, it comes together really well. And Judo Ashita is actually one of my favorite protagonist Gundam pilots. He is super cool. I also love his attitude sometimes, because he's just not having anybody's crap that day. And you know what? I relate. So Double Zeta for me is not, I think, overall better than Zeta Gundam, but it deserves to be right up there with it. So I know most people wouldn't put Double Zeta at A, but for me, it's going at A, because I do think it has a lot of its own merits, and it's honestly more fun to watch than Zeta. I think Zeta's like got that weird comforting feeling, because it's kind of like a little bit emotionless at times and just kind of, you know, calming for like a sleep aid, but Double Zeta gets me excited. I'm excited to watch Double Zeta. All right, so moving forward, our last Universal Century TV show was in 1993. People don't realize how long the UC's not had a TV show. And that was Victory Gundam. So Victory Gundam, if I can find it, there it is. Nope, that's Seed Destiny. Oh my gosh, my images are too small. I can't find Victory. Ah, there it is. So Victory Gundam, this is tough, because I think Victory Gundam is overall well made, but there is a battle that happened between Tomino and Bandai Sunrise, because Bandai, I think, purchased Sunrise around this time, and they were like, well, you got to put these model kits in this point, and you got to do these kits here, and you got to do this, this, and this. And I think that led Tomino to have a little bit of a friction point. He has apologized for this show. He said it's not his best work. He did not like the sponsor meddling with the show. For example, the original plan was to introduce the Victory Gundam in episode 4, and the sponsors, that being Bandai, was like, you have to put it in episode 1, we got to sell a model kit. And so instead of, you know, redoing the episodes, Tomino just had the team, you know, put in some narration for episodes 1 through 3, and just make episode 4 episode 1, and then the next 3 are flashbacks, which gives the show a really awkward start. But I appreciate the effort of, hey, we already did this, we're not gonna, you know, mess with it too much, but there, we made a requirement. But I think that Victory Gundam overall is too depressing, because I think that this was the, you know, kind of a low point in Tomino's life. So when he's developing these stories, it starts to come off onto the work. So while I do think that Victory Gundam is a very solidly made show, it's one I've only seen twice compared to some of the others where I've seen 3 times, 4 times, or I'll just watch random episodes. Victory Gundam's not one I want to revisit, but there is some really good highlights. Uso is a great protagonist. The Shrike team was fun while they were alive. There was, you know, a lot of great moments. The dog and the Haro are like 2 of the best characters. But, you know, I think that the show went too depressing and didn't have enough of its lighter moments. So yeah, I think that Victory, while solidly made, is not one of my fun ones, so it's going to go in the C tier. Alright, next up we have G-Gundam. So G-Gundam was, and still probably is, a bit of a controversial show. I think after Victory Gundam was very untoyetic in a lot of ways, it was very depressing and not fun. Sunrise wanted a different approach. So they broke free of the Universal Century, create the first Gundam alternate history, and that's G-Gundam. Now this show is like a shonen anime on steroids. There is so much awesomeness to this, and I just do mean pure just cool factor. G-Gundam is not so much the, you know, sort of heavier retrospective look at how humanity portrays itself in the future, but it has a lot of those elements, especially with the idea that the colonies in space are ruling over the population of Earth, and the colonies decide who's in charge by sending Gundams down to fight on Earth, and they're not worried about the casualties. There's a lot of, you know, actual realistic social commentary there. But G-Gundam is also over the top and crazy in the best ways. You have different Gundams representing different countries. You have Gundams that turn into wind. I mean, I have him still sitting on my desk, the Hurricane Gundam, as it was known in the dub. I'm blanking on the Japanese name. The Nether Gundam. The Nether Gundam is a giant windmill as a Gundam. So there is just some crazy, zany stuff. In addition to that, the characters are really well written. They have really good arcs, honestly. And it has one of the best English dubs, I think, that Gundam's produced. So G-Gundam, for me, was my introduction to Gundam, because I was coming off a really long Super Robot kick, and I was like, man, I kind of want to get into Gundam, but I don't know where to start. And I got recommended G-Gundam, and yeah, so this is where everything started. So for me, personally, it's going in the S tier, because I think that G-Gundam is incredibly underrated, and I think it does get a bad rap, especially from Bandai and the Japanese audience, who were like, this isn't very Gundam, and it isn't, but I don't think that makes it a bad thing. And it's currently streaming on Gundam Info on YouTube, so look it up. G-Gundam is fun, and I think the fun factor elevates it a lot. Plus that HD remaster they did recently just made me realize how gorgeous the show is. Next up we have Gundam Wing. Now Gundam Wing was the first Gundam show brought over to North America properly, and it aired on Toonami and started like a little bit of a Gundam boom in the early days of the anime boom. But for me, I don't remember seeing Wing on TV, so I don't have that nostalgic attachment. And I've watched Wing twice now, and I gotta say that it's a bit of a mess. And I also, you know, getting the Blu-ray set, the Ultra Edition, and reading the book where I learned that, like, the animation team was living at the studio for 6 months trying to get everything because they were super close to deadlines all the time. I can see why the second half of the show was kind of a weird little puzzle of storylines. So while I think that Wing Gundam overall is well made, it does have a lot of issues, and I think that the character dynamics were a little funky, because you have these main 5 characters, but they all seem like they hate each other, and it never really gets any better. I think Relena Priestcraft is one of the worst Gundam characters ever conceived. She is the, oh, we can't fight whatsoever, and it's like, lady, there's a war happening. You got to do a little bit of fighting. So with that, I think that Wing does stumble in a lot of places, and it's mostly, I think, hyped up and is iconicized because it has great mobile suit design, and it was that first big Toonami Gundam show. But since I don't have that, I'm looking at it, and it's going to be a C. I'm going to put it above Victory Gundam just because it's less depressing than Victory Gundam. That's going to be the ranking sometimes. Okay, next up we have a show that is near and dear to my heart, Gundam X. So as you may know from my recent video on the Gundam X G controller, and if you haven't checked it out, go take a look. The After War Gundam X is one of my favorite Gundam shows, period. This is the show that gets forgotten because it came between Wing, which was the first show that Toonami and Bandai Entertainment put out, and then Turn A, which was the last show Bandai Entertainment promised before it got canceled when their closure happened. So it's in a little bit of a bubble. It never was any plans to bring it over to the West. It was one of the last ones Nozomi actually released on Blu-ray, and also I think they got it out on DVD pretty quick. Gundam X is weird because it's canceled, but not beloved, so it's not like the original series where it was canceled, but beloved. But yet, I think that almost every person I know that's watched Gundam X has actually fallen in love with it. I think it's one of those weird shows where it didn't find its audience at the time, and that's all a bunch of economic reasons on top of that. But I think that, like, the more that it's existed and the more people have watched Gundam and they've watched the popular ones and they're looking for something different, Gundam X really comes up. And I think that part of what works for the show for me is it's kind of like a weird sort of alternate history epilogue to the Universal Century. It takes place 15 years after a war, and you kind of learn about what happened during the war, during the show. And they're on this, like, scavenger hunt for new types. And when they get the cancellation notice, the show really picks up into, like, hyperspeed on its plot, which is kind of amazing. But there's great characters, great music, great mobile suits, great storytelling, honestly. I think Gundam X is honestly not as well loved as it should be, and I hope more people will check it out. But it's definitely one of those Gundam shows you gotta find on your own. But when you do, I mean, I know most people that have watched X are like, you know, they either appreciate it or they love it. I don't see too many people that hate X that have actually watched it. So for X for me, I know it's, you know, again, most people won't get this, but it's gonna go right below G, just because I'm picking favorites, but it's gonna go in the S tier. I think that X is absolutely worth an S tier pick. Turn A Gundam. So this is the show. This was supposed to be our. We were supposed to get this in North America in 2012 with a dub. Bandai Entertainment closed and those plans went away. And Nozomi was the first ones to release this in North America. It was their first Gundam release. Turn A Gundam's an interesting show because it's incredibly slow-paced. It's not heavy on the mobile suit action, but it's very heavy on its character work and story, much like, you know, some of Tomino's previous works. This was Tomino's return to Gundam after Victory. They sort of lured him back, I think, with a, hey, you can do what you want. This is the anniversary project. And you know what? Turn A Gundam is a beautiful, beautiful show. It's gorgeously animated. Storytelling is really well done. It is not a show for everybody, though. I think that, like, Gundam X is like a hidden gem that more people would enjoy if they watched it. Turn A is for a specific type of audience. It's very much character, narrative, discussion-driven show. Kind of feels like a Star Trek show, like a 90s Star Trek show specifically, where the action is kind of just a secondary thing to the story and the characters. And I really like that. Not to mention the music by Yoko Kanno is just top-notch stuff. So with Turn A Gundam, I think that it's hard to call it a masterpiece because I think it doesn't have universal appeal, but for me it is a masterpiece. It's the first Gundam show my mom watched, in fact. She really got, you know, intrigued by the visual look of it, and we ended up watching the whole thing together. And Turn A, it's a very slow story, character-driven show, but it's up there in the S tier. I'm going to put it just below X, just because, again, very slow. But if you enjoy a slower burn kind of show, you're going to enjoy Turn A. It really is something. And if you haven't been able to get into Gundam and you've been, you know, kind of put off by the normal Gundam style, give Turn A try. It's different in a lot of good ways. All right, let's talk about Seed. I have been watching a lot of Gundam Seed, as in I've been watching a lot of things multiple times. I watched it in Japanese with the HD Broadcast Masters. I watched it in SD with the original English dub. I've watched the special editions. I'm now currently still watching the HD version with the new dub. Seed is kind of a weird Gundam show, and the fact that it sort of takes a lot of elements from the original Gundam and makes the Cosmic Era out to be kind of a new version of the Universal Century. And the best way I can put it is that I think it does kind of fail to carve out its own space if you've seen the original Gundam, but it's a great introduction to Gundam. It's kind of got that traditional Gundam format, but it's a good introduction. I think it's a little too heavy on the melodrama, especially like, and this is why it's taken so long to watch it, like fourth time, is because, you know, you get to the 30s, the late 20s to 30s of these episodes, and it's just like, all right, can you all just, like, get through your emotional trauma and stop traumatizing each other, and then just, you know, take care of the problem. So it's going to go in the B. I think C's pretty solid. I'm not counting the SD and HD version separately. There's very few differences, storytelling-wise, and it's related to bringing in stuff from OVAs. So we'll talk about that when we get to those OVAs. C Destiny. So C Destiny is a weird show because, again, it's supposed to be kind of like a Zeta Gundam equivalent. I feel it sort of flips the sides to focus on Zaft as opposed to the Earth Alliance, and doesn't work as well as Zeta. I think it does too much retreading a seed, and then its second half is just a bizarre cacophony of things that happen. There's a reason why Kira Yamato is known as Jesus Yamato. Their dude does not stay dead. I don't know where to put this because I don't hate it, and honestly, I haven't seen it. I've seen C Destiny once. I haven't watched the HD version yet, but I did see the original plus the OVA ending that's much better. I'm going to put it in the D tier? No, I'm going to put it in the low C. It's going to go below Victory. It's not terrible. It really isn't. It's just incredibly frustrating after you watch Seed and you essentially do a lot of the same events again with slightly different characters. And again, Shin Asuka got totally screwed over by the writers. I don't know what's up with that. All right, so we're going to try to blow through the next batch of these in about 9 minutes, but we'll see how it goes. I apologize if this video runs a little long. There's a lot of shows. SD Gundam Force. Oh, good. I don't have too many deep thoughts on this. This was made for the Toonami market, and then also happened to air in Japan. And yeah, it only aired half its episodes here. I think it didn't go over well. The SD style is very, very Japanese in a lot of ways, and it's very comedic. That being said, this show actually kicks ass. I watched SD Gundam Force as a kid. It's probably the first one I remember watching even. Consistently, it's the only one I had toys for, that's for sure. But SD Gundam Force, watching it again a couple years ago, it's really fun. It's a fun adventure show. I don't think it's anything groundbreaking. The animation still holds up actually pretty good for CG animation from 2004. It's going to go in the B, just below Seed. It's actually not too bad. I think it just gets hated because it's like, you had like Wing, Original, G, all the OVA stuff, you know, like 8th MS Team, and then suddenly, like, boom, cartoony cutie robots. But you know what? It's still a fun show. If you haven't checked it out in a long time, I'd recommend it if you've watched other Gundam stuff. The references to other Gundam shows are neat. 00 Season 1. So 00 I deeply love. I think it's one of the stellar standouts of Gundam. I think Season 1 comes together really nice and clean. Nice 26 episodes. So for me, you know, again, trying to rank these a little quicker than I've been going, but deeper thoughts, I guess. Season 1 of 00 is absolutely an S tier. Below Original Gundam, it comes together really nice. I think it does what Wing was trying to do, except does it better in pretty much every way. And just like with Wing, the second half was a little muddier, but Season 2, it's going to go in the A tier. I think it's still really solid. There are some frustrating aspects to it, but having watched it the first time, I was kind of pissed off. Watching it again, I settled in, and I was like, you know what, this is actually good. It's just, you know, sometimes you get wrapped up in the emotional attachment to a certain character, and then his replacement is not as cool. If you've seen 00, you know what I'm talking about. But, you know, honestly, it's still pretty solid overall. All right, SD Gundam Brave Battle Warriors. This show was 11-minute episodes, 52 episodes. It's actually sounded a lot longer than it is. I blew through this show in like 3 days. It's fun. It's a Son Goku thing. Nothing groundbreaking, so I'm going to put it top of C. Yeah, I'm putting it above Wing. It's solidly made. It just doesn't have, you know, it's not like super impactful. It's just kind of there. I'm probably going to blow some time, but Gundam Age. Gundam Age totally rocks, and more people should watch it. I think the art style of Gundam Age gives it the wrong vibe, because it has this kind of like sort of cartoony kid-friendly vibe, except like the first scene is like a kid losing his mother in a horrible destruction of a space colony city. And there's a lot of great, I think, story elements here, but it is rushed. It is incredibly rushed because they try to cram in 4 arcs into 49 episodes. It gets a little crazy, because like, I think the first 2 arcs are well-paced, and the second 2 are really, wow. I think the third protagonist, Kyo, is not as good as the first 2. But there is a lot of interesting stuff, especially in the later arcs when you see how somebody ages from a kid to an adult, and how jaded and xenophobic they can get. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, Age, I think, has a lot of great ideas, and you know what? It's going in the B tier above, it's going to go right below Seed. I think it doesn't come together as well as Seed, but, you know, I think it's still got a lot of merit to it. Okay, Build Fighters. Now, this is the original Build Fighters show. This is kind of what kickstarted the Western Gundam market again, because it's streamed on, you know, Gundam Info's YouTube channel, simulcast it, and then we got a bunch of kits. I owe a lot to this show, because I think Build Fighters was kind of like the startup of Gundam in the modern era. But that being said, I think the original Build Fighters is actually pretty solid. I think it's one of the best build shows, but personally speaking, it's going to go in the A, just below Double Zeta. I think it's really fun. It does have a story to tell, and I think that's really important. It's not just model kit spamming. So yeah, you know, there's that. Next up, Gundam Reconquista Ng. This is a show so bad, Tomino sent an apology letter and said, "I'm sorry, this show turned out this way. I feel like I failed as a director." And then Sunrise was like, "You want to redo this as 5 movies?" And he said, "Yes, please." And it's probably going to be his like swan song work for the anime industry. That being said, G-Reco is a TV show. I had no idea what was happening, and I was paying a lot of attention to it. It's the F tier. I apologize to anything good about G-Reco, but there's movie versions, and having watched 2 of the movies so far, much, much better. It just, somehow, it's just clicking better in the movie format than it was in the TV show. I think they established the world better in the movie format. TV show just kind of blows through stuff too quickly, and I have no idea what's going on. So, F tier, goodbye, G-Reco. All right, Build Fighters Try. I think I actually like this one more than original Build Fighters. Still really solidly made. Some people don't like it as much. I think it, you know, leans into the G Gundam, and that's really fun. I think more shows should lean into G Gundam. But Build Fighters Try, honestly, I think pretty dang good overall. I'm going to put it above original Build Fighters just for personal preference, but both of those are A-tier shows for sure. Mobile Suit Gundam-san. This is a 13-episode comedy short series based on a 4-panel manga. It's something. If you've never seen this and you've watched the original Gundam series, check it out. It is a blast. This is not going to hit everybody the same. I think this is an incredibly well-made show that does some incredibly risky humor that I'm surprised this is actually an official release. But that being said, I think the Gundam-san, while completely off the walls insane, still is pretty well made, so it's going to go in the B tier. People are going to look at this and give me comments. All right, so next up, 2015's Iron-Blooded Orphans Season 1. You notice the jacket. It's a Tekadan jacket. I'm an IBO guy. This was the first Gundam show I think I watched consistently on a weekly basis and bought like a crap ton of kits for. I was really into this, and I still am. IBO for me hits that really good found family storyline. I think makes a good poignant discussion about how people are treated when they don't have biological family, which goes into, you know, storylines of child homelessness, which I think is actually pretty poignant, especially because that is a sad reality of our modern day. And I think that when it comes down to it, the concept of Iron-Blooded Orphans is how can you change the world and what will you sacrifice to do it? And I think that's very, very poignant. Now, when it comes down to it, just like with 00, I don't think Season 2 hit as hard. And personally, I love the ending to this show, but I understand why a lot of people don't. It hits people a little different, and I don't want to give it away for those who haven't seen it. So, with that said, Iron-Blooded Orphans Season 1, totally an S tier for me. Again, it's going to be low S tier. As you can see, that's my top. Oh, man, I like doing top 5s, but let's do a top 6. All right. It's going in my tops. It's going to go slightly above 00 Season 1, though, just because of personal enjoyment. And then Season 2 is going to go in the low A tier, right above Season 2 of IBO. Or, Season 2 of 00. That's just where I'm feeling it. All right, so we got 4 shows left. I'm going to try to wrap this up in 5 minutes. I know I've been trying to keep like the tier list to a half hour, and I'm just rambling. So let's get to it. Build Divers. Now, Build Divers was kind of taking the Build Fighters concept out of the, here, put your plastic model on this thing, and it'll fight and get damaged, and the scan your plastic model and enter a VR world. And honestly, after the last 2 years of everything that's been going on, I would love GBN right now. Just having a nice little avatar and go in and play Gunpla stuff with my friends. I would like that. Bandai, you were a little slow on that. We could have used that. But Gundam Build Divers as a show is incredibly uneven. The first half is very much no consequence theater, and the second half is very much consequence theater. Essentially, they start giving it stakes in like the last 6 episodes. So while I personally enjoy that, because it was nice to have kind of a slice of life Gundam, it's not the best show when you look at it in the overall sense. So it's going to go low C. I'm not going to put it in D. I do appreciate Build Divers. In fact, none of these shows are going in D. The D is saved for later things. All right, so the next show was the direct sequel to Gundam Build Divers. Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise kicks so much ass. For those that have never seen this, if you got turned away by the Build Divers show, the first one, go check out Re-Rise. It's absolutely worth it. Because they decided to do this thing where like the characters go on a story mission. Except it's not a story mission. I don't want to give too much away, but where there was absolutely no stakes for a majority of Build Divers, kind of giving it a very, loosey-goosey feel, Build Divers Re-Rise gives it some stakes. And the ending of Season 1 still sits with me. It's crazy. So it's going to go in the A tier. It's going above Zeta. And then Season 2, again, I don't want to tell you anything. If you've not seen Re-Rise, if you've seen it, you may know. Season 2 of Build Divers Re-Rise is one of the best Gundam shows I've ever watched. It's so cleanly put together in I think it's 12 episodes, maybe 13. 13 episodes. 13 episodes. It is a clean story with character arcs, world building, and high stakes for a build show. So it's going in the S tier. I don't care how this looks to people. I really, really love Season 2 of Build Divers Re-Rise. And I really love Season 1. So if you've never checked it out, absolutely worth it. And then lastly, I feel like I'm one of 5 people that watch this, even though the view counts on YouTube are way higher. SD Gundam World Heroes. This was a follow-up to an ONA series, Sangoku Soketsuden, and this explored the SD Gundam world and how there's different universes or different worlds for each of these SD Gundams. This was really fun. I don't know how good it is in the sense of good, bad. I felt like it was a lot like SD Gundam Force, except it kind of bounced around a little more. Had a lot more variety to characters. Arsene Lupin X was one of my favorite characters of the whole show. And they kind of adapted historical figures as well as mythological characters into a really cool show. So I really appreciate it. And SD Gundam World Heroes, you're going in the B tier, right under SD Gundam Force, because I just wish you were a little longer. So that's the list of the TV Gundam shows. It looks incredibly uneven. I really love a lot of these shows. Like I said, I've seen a lot of them multiple times. So yeah, my top 5, G Gundam, X, Turn A, Original Gundam, and Iron Blooded Orphans Season 1, with 00 Season 1 and Build Divers Re-Rise Season 2 right behind. My A tier is Re-Rise Season 1, Zeta, Double Zeta, Build Fighters Tribe, Build Fighters, IBO Season 2, 00 Season 2. B tier is Seed, Age, SD Gundam Force, SD Gundam World Heroes, Gundam San. C is Brave Battle Warriors, Wing, Victory, C Destiny, Build Divers, nothing in D this time, and then F tier we've got G-Reco. So this is my current list, and like I said, in the next part we'll be taking a look at Gundam movies, and we'll be ranking them against the TV shows, again, just like I did here, taking each thing as its own thing, and then ranking it based on how I feel. And so this whole tier list is going to be massive when we're done with it. But yeah, we'll be adding the movies next time. So stay tuned for that. Probably coming in a week or 2, depending on how my video schedule works out with everything else I'm working on. And speaking of, if you want to keep up with future uploads, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. Lets me know that you enjoyed the tier list videos, or specifically the Gundam tier list. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Gundam TV anime is out of the ones I ranked here. I'm really curious to hear your responses. And thank you to everyone that already likes, comments, subscribes, and shares links on Twitter. You are all amazing. Also, be sure to check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for Gundam news and more. My awesome graphic designer on Twitter at darkclaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.